Let's see.
And we are live as soon as Tony gets on camera. We just had him. We lost him. He's there. We're live on YouTube right now. How is everyone?
Hello, welcome. Here we are, the first live setting. Hello, Ishmael.
Hello, sir.
We're going to get personal in this. Ishmael, both of our fathers were immigrants. And I'm going to let Ishmael start it out. This is at least the first part of our series discussing immigration. So, Ishmael, let's be personal. Talk about your dad a little bit. What did he do in 1962, 64? What jobs did he hold?
Sure. Yeah, this is one of my
situation.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite stories and topics. And I think both of us, it's a very personal topic because of our stories and the stories of our fathers. And my grandfather was in the Foreign Service, Pakistan, and in the late 50s was posted in Canada. Father was in high school at the time. And in 1962, my grandfather was assigned to, he was taken back, right? He left Canada. And my father wanted to complete his studies in North America. So he didn't want to stay in Canada anymore. Decided to come down to Washington, D.C. in November of 1962. And literally just came down to the country down here. He enrolled in classes. Took him the course of a decade between George Mason and the University of Virginia extension school that they have to complete his studies. He got a bachelor's and a master's. At the same time, he was working to take care of himself. He worked at
how old was he during those years?
He would have been 19 to about 26, 27. So he was born in 43. So if he came down here in 62, he would have been 19 years old.
Right.
When he came down. By the time he was finished with everything, he's probably 28 years old, but he worked at a hotel for many years called the Madison, and he was one of the doormen, one of the security people. If you're familiar, if those folks. Yeah. So for those folks who remember that hotel, he worked there for, I think, probably like 15, 18 years before
he did this on the sly, so to speak. He didn't get a hold of immigration.
Correct. I think the best way to put it is that he did it on the sly because, frankly, no one was bothering him about it. He had a job. He was productive. He wasn't committing crimes or whatever else.
Right.
He was getting his education and honestly couldn't be bothered.
Very common story. Very many.
Right. Just couldn't be bothered with it.
What happened? Did he stay at the Madison when he was getting his?
So he stayed there for quite a while, and I think one of the funnier stories, one of the more interesting stories, is 1968. Lyndon Johnson went to the hotel for whatever reason, and my father was, part of the security group or whatever, and he was in the elevator with LBJ. Having to push the button to go up, and he was so nervous because you imagine 6'5", big Texan man, LBJ, president of the United States, and my father, who's 5'8", immigrant, who's English was good, but he probably still didn't have the confidence to be around the president of the United States. Really struggled pushing the button. In fact, I always joke he had a Forrest Gumpian life in terms of he bumped into. He would tell me he saw Kennedy and his folks down K Street, again, different time. Bobby Kennedy, and he actually saw JFK in Canada before coming to the U.S. He saw Nixon. And believe it or not, Mr. Chris, I've never told you this story. He was around the corner from where Reagan was shot and apparently was just stuck down there where Reagan was shot. And if you look at the news coverage at the time, you'll see him kind of poking his head in the news coverage to see what's going on. Yeah, there's a story my mother told me just very recently. So he had a very interesting life. And even up to that point, into the 80s, he just never bothered getting his paperwork done or going through the whole process.
Your mom got on him, and Reagan actually put into place some workable laws. And and then he got a green card, I guess. And
he got a green card in 1986, 87. So by this point, I was 5 or 6 years old. It's actually it's actually a little scary to think about that. Up until I was 5 or 6 years old, he could have been deported at any
Oh yeah.
time.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he just easily could have said, "Hey, wait, what are you doing here? You're out." Easily could have happened. And then I know he was working on it in the 80s because I have all the paperwork and all of that, all the things he went through. And finally, in December of 1992, he officially became a citizen. I remember it was a very big deal to my mother. It was a very big deal to him when he
Oh, it's
finally
a
got it.
big
It was a big
deal.
deal. Yeah, it was a big deal
Sure.
to him that I was born in the U.S. He'd always tell family that, hey, Ismail is the first born citizen in America in our family, born in Washington, D.C. That was a very big deal to him. And it's a big deal to me. It's something I take pride in. But it was,
So
again, as you say,
do
personal.
you know what precisely Reagan did then that
It was, what was it? It was some sort of an amnesty immigration
well
reform, correct?
he
In the mid
reformed the
80s.
law.
Mm-hmm.
The original law well, I don't know what existed before that, but the one I did some research on, Immigration and Nationalization Act of 1952. And
Mm-hmm.
now my dad, a little different circumstance, but they were all very proud to be Americans and they worked very hard. So many people do. And he served his enemy. He actually was a butler to the Turkish ambassador. Now you're going back many, many more years.
Mm-hmm.
And he survived the Christian Holocaust in Turkey. Long story, after the Lausanne Agreement in 1923, there was still extreme prejudice against Christians. The population had been reduced by over 4 million during the Holocaust. He ended up working his way up and becoming a waiter at the Pear Palace. Then he was conscripted into a work battalion on the Russian border under Inouye after Ataturk passed away. He did wait on Ataturk at the Pear Palace as a young waiter. He also had another customer he waited on who was in 1944 appointed to be ambassador to America, and he told Chris, uh, "I want you to be my butler." And my father's response was, "But you know I'm a Christian." He said, "That's okay. I can take anyone I want." So he brought him to America under a diplomatic visa in 1945. Now, 3 years later, he met my mother and he gave notice at the embassy, and the ambassador had a tissy fit. He didn't want to let him go.
Which is unreal. Yeah.
He offered him a place to stay with his wife and everything, but he gave him plenty of notice and he left. Well, that presented a problem because he got a job at the Place Vendôme and the Rive Gauche, and the owner at the time was Blaise. They were also very high class French restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Waited on Jacqueline Kennedy, he waited on Harpo
Oh,
Marx,
wow.
a number of
Mm-hmm.
people.
Sure.
Matter of fact, Jacqueline Kennedy used to ask for him
Oh, wow. Oh, how do
to
you like
wait.
that?
So he and he but he had a hard time becoming a citizen because at the very beginning, uh, the man who hired him, Blaise, the owner of Place Vendôme, uh, sponsored him to
Mm-hmm.
uh, but they had a hard time getting Turkey. Turkey
Mm-hmm.
was very concerned to get a certificate of good standing out of Turkey, but the
Mm-hmm.
ambassador wasn't happy because he left, and the Turks never produced it. So he got an eviction notice. He went to court. He took immigration naturalization classes. It took him from 1948 to 1952, when the
Which is
Immigration
unreal.
Nationalization
Mm-hmm.
Act was passed, to finally get his citizenship. And I'd been born
Mm-hmm.
in 49. My brother was born in 51. So he actually had a family and two kids at the time, but he stayed with it for over 4 years. He
Mm-hmm.
very exciting thing for him to
Oh,
become a
sure.
citizen in America. So so we both are sons of immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sons of immigrants who had to fight for their citizenship one way or another.
Right, right, right.
I think just the and maybe a different path to
Well,
get there. But when I hear your father's story,
just the fact that they traveled all the way here lets you
right,
know, right there, they're in a minority of people who have that degree of drive and that incentive to go to another country. And of course they wanted to be American citizens. They were proud to be American citizens.
yep,
In many instances, many immigrants are really better better citizens than us right here. We're born here. And
absolutely,
they take it almost reverently. And I'm sure our fathers did. But now today, at that time when they were citizens, now I know your dad, welfare started coming into being in 65, and he wasn't a citizen until 92 when Reagan changed the laws, but he never was reliant on that system. And today, it's a different ball game. You have people, particularly in South America, but very many other places, who are very much aware that if they come to America and they can prove that they were very much not discriminated against, but they were very much what word am I looking for? They were uh, it's worse than prejudice. I'll think of it in a minute. Uh, they can get a quicker admission than our parents did. And okay, what word is it, Tony? Come on. The
that their life is in danger, that something's going to happen to
right.
them.
If they can show if they can show that
distress and
that there's
absolutely
5 categories, and if they can show that they fit into one of them, and they had to leave their country, their life was in danger, they can get a quicker admission. And everyone coming into the country, now this is an important statistic, they can get into the country to have a hearing. Now the law is somewhat confusing on that. If you go to 8 USC section 235 little b part 1, you'll read that every one of them has to be detained till they have a full hearing, and till they can show that they don't have a criminal record, and also they can make their case of why they were being threatened in their other country, and be it political reasons or whatever the reason, and get in on that sort of emission status. Our parents came here just to work, and that's a much harder road. And
it is significantly harder, not just much harder. It is, which I think, and we'll get into it a bit more, how it incentivizes trying to use the back door, because the front door has 8 different gates.
They were basically honest. They didn't come. Now my father escaped the Christian Holocaust, and it was extremely prejudicial against Christians, and he had an argument, but he didn't know that. And when he got a second job and left the embassy, there wasn't, we didn't even have medical coverage when I grew up. When he left the embassy, he just was looking for work. He met the woman he wanted to marry, and he wanted to move on with his life, and he did. And so they were living their lives. They were great citizens during the period when they were working here, and not citizens, but they weren't claiming to be in threat of their life. Now today the game is show up at the southern border, claim that your life is threatened in your country of origin, have some questions asked to you. You get there. You're actually oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, a gang member in a South American narco group has taken money from you, given you a bracelet, and told you what to say. It has nothing to do with the reality of your situation. You could, matter of fact, if you were so threatened in that country, you could have gone to the country next to it. You didn't have to travel all the way here. But they come here because they're prepped to come here, because they know there's a lot of freebies today due to our welfare system. And even though many of them want to get to work and everything, they understand and they pay to take advantage of the whole situation. And
which to me is just one of those where, and the fundamental issue, and I think you and I at a high level are on the same place with this. And we agree that number one, we can't have people, to your point, doing this being sponsored by cartels, for lack of a better word. And the issue I tend to have here is that we have made legal immigration, going through the process, nearly impossible to do. If you want to do it the right way, if you want to do it and you show up in America with the ability to work, with having gone through the steps, it takes you over a decade potentially, if not more. There are people who will die waiting for this, because we simply disincentivize doing it the right way.
You need to have money to hire a lawyer.
Absolutely.
It's a whole process. The other way, it's now there's another law in US 8 USC. If you read down a little further, there is a law requiring anyone coming in and claiming that their life is in dire threat to be kept in detention. The exception to it is another section in the law, which makes the law, as Ismail just said, is a mess, every aspect of it. Section 236A gives an immigration officer, Homeland Security guy now, during the period he could determine that it's okay to let him go. Now, it's not, it's up to an officer who just meets a person who may not even be able to speak English, let alone
Correct.
now, and he's asking them some questions, and they are determining universally, unless there's something really blatant that they're on a list or something, they're letting them go. So they're releasing them, and they're causing the country billions of expense. And
billions of expense, and just it is a terrible situation for the people themselves, because you let them go, they literally have no idea what to do. So they end up sleeping next to the bus depot waiting for a bus. So suddenly you have migrants just sleeping on the street. Well, that's if they get somewhere with a hotel room, right? To your point, they're in hotel rooms.
They help kids.
They're homeless. There is just all of it. I think we both agree. All of it, because we have made it, and this is very important to the overall point here. I have to show this. I have to. This is, if you want to be if you want to do it the right way, look at all the steps involved between any of these programs here to legally get in this country. And to me, this is my perspective on it, we're doing this on purpose so that it is too hard to just get over here the quote unquote right way illegally. Look at all of these steps in every single one of these. There's, these are the basic ways. And look at that, just to get in, and you're talking about the refugee program, which again, persecution. Have you been persecuted by others, or do you have?
Well,
how do you determine
that's
fear?
the word I was looking for.
Right, persecution.
And we've always, if you've been persecuted, you can apply to come in on a quick, supposedly, and that's why
supposedly quick.
We're all being told, and they're being taught to say that, because every other way is slower. So there's dishonesty going on both sides. Okay, it's not just the confusing mess of immigration laws.
I would say that incentivizes to go to because people, what this is nature. Nature goes to the path of least resistance.
There are other things
anywhere in nature
that are drawing them, i.e., free medical care. We never had. I never even had medical coverage. Any emergency room in the nation. I can show you. I can take you. Ted Flynn, a personal friend. He's written about 6 books. He says you can go in as an alien today and get offered a Medicaid card.
I'll give you some irony on that. Is people in Texas will drive to Mexico for medical care because it's cheaper.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
those are the ones
you'll
that have
go
to
down
pay.
if you want your
Those
dentist.
are the ones
You'll
that
go
have to
down
pay.
to Mexico
Well,
to get. I think that's the irony of that. I know folks here in
well,
Texas who go to Mexico to get their teeth fixed. You
Medicaid,
know,
there's a
that
lot of
that's what's
fraud.
the
A
irony
lot
with
of
it.
fraud goes on with Medicaid. Uh, just the food stamp program, they estimate over 30% fraud. And anything the government is handling, you have issues. And you have a lot of issues in all the welfare programs. There's 100 welfare programs out today. So anyone who makes it here is sold that by the cartel, by the drug cartel, and told about the benefits. And they're paying the cartel members to get them to the border and to get them across the border. Now, also, others are coming too. And others are coming that have to get out of where they are. Who knows what the reason is? But we do have a right to know who's coming, number one. Now, the suggestion.
Funny enough, though, I'll say this one thing. Our founding fathers, when you look at in the Constitution itself, this is a very interesting article I'll send you, they did not enumerate immigration to the federal government, believe it or not, because as Thomas Jefferson said, essentially, we need people here, was his thesis, and we need to get them here as rapidly as possible to increase the population of the country. And 10% of the very first Congress was foreign born, meaning outside of the continental United States itself, whereas today it's only 3%. So I think it's very interesting that in the Constitution, it doesn't enumerate this to the federal government.
Well, I think the sanctuary cities, the welfare systems weren't entrenched where your dad and my dad came here, not like today. And they're being sold. They know they can get. They're being told you get to a sanctuary city, you can get a driver's license, an electric bill, you can become a voter. And they're being told that. Matter of fact, there were Acorn was very large in getting voters. Right?
But even then, like I would argue, if you get here, to your point, we want to know who you are. We want you to have a driver's license, because if you don't, suddenly you get pulled over, arrested, you start doing the wrong things. And I think my point is, we want to incentivize people to come here, good people to come here, are willing to work, to your point. We should know who they are. We want to do it fast and efficiently as possible. So that when they come here, they're not, as you've talked about before, in an underground economy or on welfare or whatever. And we have, this is my thesis on it, we have set up the system to make it as difficult as possible to legally come here. And hence we're having people go through the southern border, and no one wants this. No, if people would admit, I'd have a better time with this, that, hey, we just don't want anyone coming here legally or illegally. Okay, that's fine. That's a discussion. But we have this claim, oh, you're coming over here illegally, whereas coming here legally is very difficult.
The group that's coming today, they're called asylum seekers, because as you said, what's the word again? They're being
persecution.
They're claiming persecution, but the statistics don't lie. Less than 5% of them are ultimately accepted as asylum seekers. Over 50% don't show up for the hearings. And immediately on that day, they're issued deportation orders. Now, my dad received a deportation order. As I said, he couldn't show, because the Turkish government wouldn't cooperate.
Right.
I mean, he never had anything on his record, but they wouldn't cooperate. So, but the country does have a right to know who's coming in. So when you see less than 5% are actually what they claim to be, it is a bit of a red flag. Something's going on that's not in our best interest. So the thing is, Ishmael and I very much think immigrants should be able to come to take jobs. But that's not what this group, the asylum seekers, which they all are claiming that they're being persecuted. They're not. 95% aren't. And once they get in the country, they're setting dates years ahead for their
Years,
and
literally years ahead,
getting
which again
established.
to me is ridiculous. How
Yeah.
long it takes.
Well, you need, if you're, there's not really, there are very few places in South America where, or you cross another country and could be an asylum seeker there. I mean, if your life was really in jeopardy, you just want to get out of that country, you don't have to go through 4 countries to get here. You just have to
Right,
get one. So
right,
there's
right.
the appeal of sanctuary cities. There's the appeal of having mayors buy you a hotel room, of having all those things are drawing a lot of people. So it's not exactly the same reality that his dad and my dad faced. And that doesn't mean the people are bad, and you can't blame a person for wanting to improve themselves. But the reality is the whole structure today with the amount of payments that are being made and the costs, it's a tremendous hindrance. And we're going to go on with this. We're going to at least make it a two-part discussion. I wrote a paper, and I'll say a couple words about it. My dad was sponsored by Blaise, the man that owned those 2 French restaurants. And the sponsor took him to immigration and stood with him and said, I need this man, and stayed with him for almost 5 years through his naturalization courses and everything, because there was a relationship there. They economically needed each other. And that's what we should do. We should have sponsors. And it works 2 ways. It allows the person not to be hidden in the woodwork. It allows them to come forward and to apply. And there ought to be a period of time, a 5-year period of time, where he can work his way towards citizenship. He shouldn't, the day he gets there, be entitled to things that a citizen gets. And for example, medical care and everything. Now, that's not to say if he has an emergency, he can't get it. But I grew up without medical coverage. So I was in my mid-20s when I had my first coverage. And I had football operations for my knee and everything, and we had to just pay. You know,
Hmm.
uh, of course, the expenses now are ridiculously higher, and but the point is, you have to make some strict lines and be uniform about it. And if employers need people to work, there's nothing wrong with that. They can't get them at home, and they can bring people into work. Then they have a responsibility to inform the INS, Homeland Security, that they do have an alien working. If that alien can show continuous uh, people that he's working for, nobody in America will have a problem. Now if they don't have that report from an employer and they're here, then
They're
that's
gone.
sort of
That's
a
a problem.
you want to know why. I mean, what are they doing? What's going
Hmm.
on? So, uh, you know, but it is a way to work to a green card, and requiring classes at least in the last year before their citizenship should be a
Hmm.
given. I mean, my dad only had a fourth-grade education, but he spoke 5 languages fluently. He used to read the encyclopedia, and when other people watch TV, he'd sit there with an encyclopedia like a kid to the day he died and read it. And he loved America. So, but it needs to be simplified. Taking in now the proposal that Biden put forward has 2 big red flags. It continues the policy of taking the people into the country. It just limits the number to 5,000 a day, which is 1,825,000 a year. That's not a small number. It changes nothing else. Now it claims to expedite it, the hearings, which would mean that they would be evicted, but they're still letting them into the population. They're not being detained. And it's a legitimate question as to whether or not this country should pay the expense of detaining them to the hearing anyway. Because whoever they are, we don't have, they're going to get backed up. It's not going to happen the same day. It can't happen the same day. So, again, they're
And
misrepresenting the
it,
reason they're coming, which is what's creating the problem.
and this is where I think in our embassies and consulates around the world. And one of the issues that happened the last 4 years, we right now have an 8.8 million backlog in processing this, in our
Oh,
8.8 million backlog in processing in our
they've
consulates.
been
We need
taught
to fund having it in country
lying.
there, where we can know the people, we have people on the ground, you have the hearings there, and therefore you're not showing up the border, people aren't prepared, and you don't have these surges. You do all the work in those countries there, and that's it. It's done with.
95% of them are misrepresenting themselves. 95%, because they're being told that's the way to get in. So
Mm-hmm.
they're claiming to be asylum seekers, and they're not.
That's it is, and part of it being that the proper way to come here is so backlogged, so convoluted, to your point, so filled with red tape, with bureaucracy, because we have purposely made it that way. And the easiest way to solve the asylum problem and the persecution problem is making the right way to come here, as I mentioned, the front door, as easy and efficient as possible.
Homeland Security, the legal system, you take it away from them. If the employer needs 5 people, let him get 5 people and notify INS electronically with a form. They are working for me, and that would start their clock, so to speak.
Mm-hmm,
and of course, they're going to have a no criminal record for 5 years.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
There's a bunch of things that have to exist. And if he leaves that job and takes another job, that new employer has to inform INS, Homeland Security, that Mr. So-and-so is
which is similar to how the H-1B system works today. We just have such extreme low caps on it that I think it's like 100,000 people per year. That again, people just show up, right? Or overstay tourist visas, for example. I think that's, the 9/11 hijackers had student visas. They were legal technically on student visas, and they just stayed. So to your point, absolutely. And
they came
I've
in.
always argued,
they came in. They weren't all students,
but they had student visas. That they were, they all had they had student visas. Yep, they were on student visas. They may have overstayed them.
Well, that's
whatever else.
That's a big concern. And we have a right, we have a duty to know who's coming in the country. And you can't. This is just like a smorgasbord. I mean, it's the most screwed up mess I've ever seen in my life. And the people making the money on it aren't our country. I mean, we're hopefully some of these people are going to work. Some of them, they're probably the majority are honest. The point is, you have a right to know who's here. You cannot allow them to walk across the border. God knows hundreds and hundreds of thousands have been gotaways, so to speak. They just can't come in the country. You have agents that are taught to watch out for narcotics and everything, that are relegated to doing interviews and finding meals for these immigrants and places to stay, and they're taken out of what they were.
100%. They should be focused on absolutely. And I
so
think again,
and the cartels are just playing it like a
and again, if you have a system where, I think we both agree with this, where it is easy and efficient to do it the right way, we don't have the mess we have today.
And
I mean, it should be a 3-hour appointment that you can book next week online.
There are things in the original Immigration Act, like a 7% rule, that no more than 7% in 1 year should come from one country. And by the way, we shouldn't have 8 million people, say 7.5 million of which came from South America, and the rest of the world nowhere. We've got to have some sort of a system where we get talented people who want to come here and fill positions that are needed, and can start that process with a sponsor, with an employer, and stick with them. So we're going to talk about this some more. It's a huge problem. What's happened, I've never seen what's happened in the last 3 years. I mean, Ishmael's down in Texas, although he hasn't seen much of it. He's not not.
No, our governor at a cost of $1,800 per person puts them on a bus somewhere else. So unfortunately, we have a lot of work here in Austin, ready to go.
Put all of them on a bus.
At $1,800 a person.
And that might be creating
that
environment. That might be creating the environment to get this resolved at last. Because a lot of places like Obama didn't even tolerate.
Well, Obama was, and again, I've got data on it, was probably deporting them the most compared to the most recent presidents. I mean, across his administration, you look at the data, he was, the immigration activists called him the Great Deporter because of how many deportations were going on. To me, again, I think
just out of hating Trump, I guess everyone today's flipped on their positions in the Democratic.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certain, but he was, he was known amongst the, the DACA activists as someone, they called him the Great Deporter at the time. I think from my perspective, again, if we as a country need to decide, do we even want legal immigrants? And if we do, how do we make it as easy as possible? My personal thesis is hold on. My thesis is we really don't. And if we don't, that's fine. Let's just say it and we can stop this nonsense and just set up a big wall and just close the borders. Or else we have to make this a much faster system. It cannot take 12 years to get a green card. It cannot take a year to get an appointment at our embassy or at our consulate.
And you let the employers and the education system bring them in. And then
I actually didn't.
And you take Homeland Security as a bureaucratic mess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's ridiculous. What's happening at the border is just ridiculous. They're not asylum seekers. They're not.
And I think the way you're articulating it makes a lot of sense, saying that essentially, if you have a desire for them here, being an employer, a university, whatever, it is on you to keep reporting, to be held accountable for them, correct? To be held accountable for someone that you said can come over here. Again, we've got, I think, 22 different types of visas as well. We should only have one visa. Come over here, maybe a second one for tourists that is a very limited type of visa, but we have over 22 types. And as showed that graphic, just getting that, and I know family members of mine who've gone through the process where you fly to our embassy, you spend thousands upon thousands of dollars, and you aren't allowed in, and it takes months and months just to get the appointment. Whereas I'm a believer, if we make this fast and efficient, to your point, we wouldn't have a 95% asylum rejection rate because that wouldn't be a way to get in this country. Well, you would already do the work before coming here.
There are people, my family, there are people that had to leave, Jewish people during the Holocaust. And actually FDR rejected
Didn't let them in. He didn't let them in. Yeah.
But the point is, Palestinians today, who are threatened. There are people, but it's a joke when you see them coming out of everywhere in South America, everywhere. They're just walking across. They're whatever. Their life isn't that great there. They're coming here for the wrong reasons. They're not coming here as asylum seekers, and that's like we said, over 95% aren't. They're coming here. They understand the backlog. They know the game. They play the game, they get here, and hopefully the majority of them are honest. Hopefully we don't get any more like the ones that perpetrated 9/11. But the system is set up that we're getting people that shouldn't be coming. We just numerically, when you tell me 8-9 million are here, that in line, what about the gotaways? How many hundreds of thousands of gotaways? Now, Gotaway doesn't want to even pretend that he's going. All he's doing is going over the border. Okay, so, and that's just hundreds of thousands. Okay, so I think that's a good session. I think it's a good time to stop. We're going to talk a bit more about the paper. The paper I wrote should be posted on our website. called Immigration, and it deals with this notion of having a sponsor, a private citizen that needs somebody, be it high tech, be it working in a field that needs somebody to work, being the sponsor and taking on the responsibility of oversight. And also it takes it off homeland, and they're going to have people watching computers and taking forms and counting the days a person's here, and they're going to know if the person commits criminal acts. They're going to know if it's a long period where there's no form being submitted. Then they're going to have to find the person. So they'll have enough people to check up on who aren't working, and then the sponsor will of course be responsible for his employee.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we'll talk about these things a little bit more. We're not through with immigration. I do have a paper up that talks about very specifically areas that have changed in this century with immigration and the tremendous costs it's putting on our welfare system in America. And there are benefits. There are untold benefits to many immigrants. As Ismail said, as I said, they come here honestly, they come looking for work. But thank you for tuning in. We look forward to next week. Before we go, I want to take a word to tell you about next week. We're going to go back and do a second segment of Is There a God? Now, we left the first segment in almost prehistoric times with the early man, Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon, and the evidence that there was a need to believe in a power greater than man, and drawings, in burial rites, and almost it seemed biological. Now, nobody has ever suggested that it is biological, the belief in a God. Now, next week, we'll look at the theisms, atheism, pantheism, and theism. The theism, of course, is the belief in a God. Pantheism is that all matter is one with the universe and everything is a God, and it totally rejects the concept of good and evil. And then we'll do a third session on it when we talk about the 4 or 5 biggest religions in the world, but we're not there yet. So next week, we're going to get back to Is There a God? This has been our talk on immigration. It's a huge problem. What's happening today needs to change. Anyway, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll hear you next Friday at 4 o'clock. We'll be back up. Thank you.